Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, for nerds by nerds, hanging out with this nerd.
Nerdarchy Ted.
There are many paths to adventure. These are but a few.
Jump down to the description below where you can sign up for Nerdarchy the newsletter, get weekly gaming tips, as well as learn how to game with Nerdarchy.
And today we have a GM 911 for you guys, viewer suggestion.
From Luke Sovereign.
And I believe that one came over on Facebook, so probably will not be in the description below this time.
But it was a short one. Essentially, the GM would like us to talk about how you get players looking for adventures as opposed to spoon feeding them hooks. So if you have a GM 911 and you'd like our suggestion on it, you can send those over to us at nerdarchy@gmail.com. We also take viewer suggestions.
So I guess the problem is I think he's misunderstanding hooks a little bit and plot devices. The players have to take them. It's just a matter of putting interesting things out there in your game so that the players can engage with. And that being said, like, I've used plenty of plot hooks and my players have been like, yeah, we're not doing that. We're going to go shopping instead today.
And ultimately, as this is a back and forth game, it is a situation where, as the GM, every time you open your mouth, there's something that's going to lead to more adventure or more quests or more intrigue or whatever it is that you want more of. It's possible for that to happen. So when an NPC talks and your players engage with them, take note of that. That means something. If the opposite happens and the players aren't being drawn into what you're talking about, well, take note of that too, because that means whatever plot thread, whatever that NPC is doing, isn't interesting to your players. They don't have a desire to go down that road.
That being said, too, also like mining their backstories to see what's in there is another thing. To see if their characters already have goals and objectives that they want to go after. And really, you have to ask yourself, if they're building characters that do, why aren't they using them? Why isn't this on the table for them? Why are they waiting for hooks? Or are they just not putting that kind of stuff in there? I mean, it gets to be a little tricky too, because as the GM, anything you introduce into the world, and we've talked about this in previous videos, anything you introduce into the world is a potential hook, right? So it's really hard for you to not actually be using hooks in your game. Even in a sandbox style game, if you, the GM, have created these interesting places for the players to go check out and you just throw them out there, you've just basically cast a net. So you're still hooking them.
All right, so take, for instance, the last session that I ran. It hasn't gone up yet, right?
No, this weekend.
So the last session that I had run, players had gotten back into the hometown of Griffingaff, and I gave them a whole bunch of information that were rumors that were being shared around. And they investigated and they turned things out. And I had put a character that they had interacted with before. It was actually an NPC apprentice to Scott's character, but he was of a different mindset than when they had last left him. And then attached to other things was a character that had never been discussed before that was loosely related to Nate's character. Two separate plot lines, both linked directly to two player characters, and the player character that Scott was addressed to was attacking dwarves. So that's going to have Dave involved. So half the table is now engrossed in these stories because there's a chord that's being struck by each of them. Yeah, I created the hook, but all I did was attach something that I know those characters are going to care about.
And that's exactly it. Like I said, it goes back to, it's virtually impossible to not have some kind of hooks unless you've got a table of players that go, I want to do this, right? And if you have 6 players going, I want to do this, and this is different for each of them, that's a nightmare, because either they're going to all want to go off in separate directions, right? And that kind of kills the whole point of having an adventuring party. Or there's going to be discussions, arguments. So really, when you have like a couple players that don't really care what the rest of the group does, they're just they're good to roll with ever. That's in its own way a blessing, because you don't need everyone trying to do a separate thing all the time.
A party can only have one leader. And at times it might ebb and flow and shift and change based off of the current storyline or based off of who is taking that point position in the actual role playing angle of it. But when you actually get down to the thick of it, if you've got four people in your party and they each want to do something different, it's going to be a challenge because there's no way to do that easily. There's always someone going to be sitting out, waiting, twiddling their thumbs, waiting for their turn, and it's going to be a challenge to every single person at the table, and more so to you as the DM.
And not only that too, like if you're just waiting for your players to provide the adventure, like you're gonna have to run everything off the fly then, which is fine. If you're good with that, go for it. It's not a big deal. But if you're not that kind of player or GM, that's going to be problematic for you as well. Even if you're doing a sandbox and you have like these interesting things occurring, at least you have some kind of idea what's going on, and you can kind of work with that.
So now, on the other side of that is how do you get the players doing things without you putting stuff out there? You can always just use that core phrase that I've used many, many times in the game. So, what are you doing? And just prompting your players with that kind of a question, it gives them the idea of, oh, well, I can make my own choice right now. What am I going to do? What do I want to do? And the first player to speak up, roll with it, and then say, okay, well, now how are you getting the others involved? And before player B, C, D, E, whatever says, well, I want to go do this and I want to go do that, get them folded into that one story. This prevents the issue of, I want to go here, I want to go there, and gets everyone wrapped up into one storyline. Next time you get to a point where it could go to a choice, don't ask everybody what do you do and say, oh, player B, what do you want to do right now? And that'll give them the lead, and then you have the ability to have that changing style where each player gets a chance to do something that they want to do without that chaotic every which way direction.
Yeah, you definitely want to try and figure out how to tie things together so that everyone isn't going in separate directions all the time. It's a group game, so the characters, the players should want to do things as a group, and if they don't, that's an out of game discussion about, well, what is a D&D game really about?
Right.
So it's a collaboration of a group of people. Like the lone wolf is terrible for a D&D game. We can go into that in a different video. But like a good example would be my Scarlet Sisterhood game that I just ran. We were down a player. I kind of laid out, hey, here's the thing. We did a little bit of a recap, and these are all the things floating around. What do you guys want to do? And they took it in a direction I wasn't expecting. They're like, hey, you remember that rumor we got when we went to the hunting lodge that the pixies overheard? I want to look into that family. So I was like, okay. Well, so what does that mean? Well, they're a well-known merchant family. They're in the town. Finding them isn't really hard. Like, you can just point to their house so I'm like, well, but they're a merchant house. They're kind of nobles. They have to get there somehow. They have to get their money somehow. So I'm like, well, they have a business and they have their whole, their mansion. And, so what do you want to check out? Well, we want to check out the business. What's that? Well, they're known for importing and exporting goods from both the Elven and Dwarven kingdoms. And, they export to Rylor as well as Drellic. And they have one of the largest warehouses on the port. So that they say, well, we want to go check that out. So they go and check that out, and they break in, and then they break into the office, and then they copy a bunch of the ledgers and notes, and then find out that they're trafficking in blood cultist paraphernalia, secretly as well. And they found like a ton of money that decided not to take, and Megan was like super brilliant with, I'm using their lamp, but I'm going to make sure I refill the lamp oil before we leave to the right level.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. There's quite a few comments about that lamp oil. Why didn't I think about the lamp oil before? Which I would have totally let that one slide. But actually I should have given her inspiration for that. So, and so that's what you need to do is you need to just direct your players and be like, well, what do you guys want to do? If you want them to direct the story, But it's a double-edged sword. Remember, if you let them do it, then you have to then figure out how you're going to provide that story. You ask them to basically provide, but they're not providing it. You are, So as long as you're cool with it.
Really, you're asking them to say where is my brain going to go? Because honestly, like I'm all about doing work on the fly. If I come to the table with more than a few sentences prepared, the players are like, it's a good game. If I do next to nothing, it's like, oh, that was fantastic. Right. So improv is apparently where I'm better suited as a DM. It is what it is. But if that's not your style, then you really need to give them veins or options of choice so that you can have things prepared.
And the other thing too is there's these like choices that they've made previously that can affect what's going on now. Like I had them, they were investigating an inn at one point, and the one character kind of was cozying up to some of the guys in the bar in order to try and get information, and he tried to slip her a Mickey, but she tried roofing her essentially, and she figured it out, so she didn't drink it, and she leaves. Well, Irina introduced that character later on again, and you could say that was a quest giver or me introducing a plot hook, but not really, because they instigated this plot hook by their actions previously. And that's kind of what's going to happen in the living, breathing world. Like, as they do things, there's going to be this domino effect where you could say it's you introducing hooks, or you could say it's the consequences of things that they've done previously, coming back to light, and which ties them deep into your world anyway. So I like doing that. I like saying, oh, this person, this is a real person. They're here even when you're not. They're doing stuff. And when they come back and you come into the limelight, into the spotlight again, then your players have to interact with them, and they're like, oh, well, that's the guy, and it instantly, got my players emotionally and kind of connected to this guy, going, oh, that's the one that tried to roofie me, and then the other player was like, she found out about it, but she wasn't there when it happened, so she got to react to it for the first time. So there's other ways for you to introduce plots that they're not really your plots, but they're their plots that you've just repackaged for them.
Yes, it does not have to be, all right, you show up at a tavern, some crookedy old man comes up and says, adventurers, I would like to hire you for this mission. It doesn't need to be those kind of things.
But it could be.
Well, absolutely it can be. And there's times that I've literally been like, all right, I'm going with all the stereotypes here. The quest giver is the rickety old man, and he's really the villain trying to lure the. Now, you can go down that road if you really like.
He's the old man quest giver reading from the town community board.
But you can use the player's goals. You can use what the player character wants to do, or what the player themselves have told you out of game what they'd like to do. You can do all of these different things because character and player don't always necessarily have to agree. And you can have things that are not those simple hooks, but are indeed still things to draw the players in.
I'll just end with one final caveat, and that is ask your players what they want to do. Not in game, out of game. Just talk to them and go, how do you want to do this? Are you guys interested in directing the story and where the adventures go? They might tell you no. they might not want what you want, so get on the same page with them first and see, if there's common ground there to begin with, because you might do that to them and like they might get stage fright, or or be like a deer caught in the headlights because they just don't know what to do and they don't understand the expectations. So you're better served as the GM if you figure out what your players' expectations are, and if you share with them what yours are, so you guys can work together on it.
What do you guys think about this situation? Do you have this come up in your games? Put your thoughts and comments down below. While you're down there, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
You can check us out over at nerdarchy.com.
So until next time, stay nerdy.